So with this, we proceed to the next topic, and we have our old friend Dr. Vishal Safle, who is here for a topic like vertigo. I request Dr. Shukla to please introduce Dr. Vishal Safle.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
And he is done fellowship for intervention neurology from VCND, and right now is we look forward to hear from him the clinical aspects of vertigo management. Over to Dr. Vishal.
Thank you, Ravi, Dr. Ravi. I can't see how to share this. Just a minute.
Just try moving it if you could.
Just a minute. Yeah, 2 minutes. Just a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Just so we can slideshow so that we can see the full screen.
Yeah. Hello, good evening. Thank you, first of all, for invitation for this wonderful conference. Vertigo is one of the common disorder in our day-to-day practice. As a neurologist, I also see almost 10 to 20% of patient daily. If you see proportion of patient presenting vertigo or dizziness in daily OPDs, so this is a very common problem. So let us discuss vertigo. Vertigo occurs when there is a vertigo occurs when there is a disturbance in the balance mechanism. So let us see how the balance is maintained by the body. So balance is maintained by integration from the various sensory inputs from the vestibular, visual, and somatosensory systems. There are different reflexes. Vestibular ocular reflex which stabilizes our vision during the movement, and there is a vestibular spinal reflex which stabilizes our posture from the afferent inputs from the vestibular system. Cerebellum works to remove the inaccurate motor outputs and fine-tuning the movements. That's how the balance is maintained. Now coming to the vestibular system is consist of semicircular canals, atrial, saccule, and vestibular component of the 8th cranial nerve. Now there are three semicircular canals: anterior, posterior, and horizontal. They are situated, they are positioned 90 degree perpendicular to each other, and whole system is in sagittal plane. There it is 45 degree over the petrous ridge. Semicircular canal sense angular movements. They are also called as dynamic vestibule. Atrial and saccule sense linear movements of the motion. Linear movements. They are called as static labyrinth. This is how they are positioned inside the internal ear. These are the semicircular canals: anterior, posterior, and lateral. And atrial and saccule. Terminal end of the canal, semicircular canal, is called as ampulla. And this is the cochlea, which is more anterior part. So anteriorly cochlea deals with the hearing. Vestibular system deals with the maintenance of balance. Now sensory epithelium of the semicircular canal is called as cristae. Semicircular canals contains endolymph, which is a fluid. Then atrial and macula, atrial and saccule, they contain macula as a sensory epithelium. Cristae, which is the sensory epithelium of the semicircular canal, they contain cupula, which is having a same specific gravity as compared to the endolymphatic fluid. And whenever there is a movement of the endolymphatic fluid, there is a displacement of the cupula, and along with the hair cell get polarized, and that's how signals are generated with the head movement. In macula, they contain otoconia. And they lie over the otologic membrane. Otoconia are slightly heavier, and it changes our position of the head with respect to the change in the gravity. In atrial, this macula is positioned in vertical direction, while in saccule it is horizontal. So any change in position of the head with respect to gravity and or angular movement is sensed by the vestibular apparatus. Now this is the vestibular system with a nerve supply. There are the vestibular nerve which supplies the different these sensory end organs of the vestibular system, and cochlear nerve, cochlear division of the vestibulocochlear nerve, it deals with the hearing. So both divisions travel together as a acoustic nerve, and they relay into the brainstem in the vestibular nuclei and cochlear nuclei. Horizontal canal, the nerve supplying the horizontal canal relay into the abducens nucleus and oculomotor complex, while the nerves from the anterior posterior canal, they relay into the trochlear nucleus like fourth nerve and oculomotor complex. So that's why the eye movements are triggered roughly in the plane of stimulus of the each canal. Now coming to the dizziness. Dizziness, this is one of the famous quote by one of the doctor. So there can be a few physicians in the so dedicated that they do not experience a slight decline in spirit when they learn that their patient complaint is dizziness. So that's how it is. Sometimes vertigo is in our clinical practice, diagnosis of any disorders is made by clinical history, but here the history is so vague in vertigo, especially it's not the patient's fault. It's difficult to analyze the symptoms and difficult to express symptoms in their own language from the patient. So sometimes it becomes very frustrating. Dizziness is very common. Almost 10 to 20% of general population have dizziness, will have dizziness. First, we have to see what exactly patient mean by dizziness. So we have to categorize. We have to give them leading questions so that they come with the answer, and we can categorize dizziness into the different categories. So there are 4 groups where we categorize symptoms: lightheadedness, pre-syncope, disequilibrium, and then vertigo. So every dizziness is not vertigo, and treatment and evaluation depends on the what patient is having. So it is very important. So let us see what lightheadedness means. Patient's complaint is very vague and subjective in this case, and patient will use term like giddiness, oozing, but there is no actual fall or bearing. Common causes of lightheadedness are hyperventilation, hypoglycemia, anemia, head trauma, psychogenic disorders like anxiety, phobia, depression. Now coming to the disequilibrium, here patient complaining of imbalance of the gait without any abnormal head sensation. There is no sense of abnormal movement or illusion of the movement. Most common cause of disequilibrium is aging, then peripheral neuropathy, musculoskeletal disorder, gait disorder, Parkinson. Now coming to the presyncope. Presyncope is a impending sense of faintness or loss of consciousness. There is no loss of consciousness, but whenever these symptoms occur, whenever patient assumes a erect posture after a prolonged recumbency, there will be no symptom in supine position, and most of the symptom will be occur in the morning hours, because patient try to assume the erect posture after the prolonged recumbency overnight. Most common cause is orthostatic hypotension, then autonomic dysfunction, cardiovascular disorder, underlying severe stenosis of the brain vessels, carotid or vertebrovascular system. Then certain medications, antihypertensive, antiarrhythmics, especially diuretics. Then coming to the vertigo. True vertigo symptom is patient is having a patient will complain of spinning, whirling, tilting or falling like sense. He will complain of illusion of the motion of self and environment. This is a classical vertigo. Along with that, patient will have some oral symptoms in the form of tinnitus, then hearing loss, vomiting. Sometimes some vertigo symptoms are very mild, then it is very difficult to categorize into 2 vertigo. But in this case, we have to see the past history of the patient, and accordingly we can arrive at the symptomatology, and we can see that this is a mild symptoms of the previous episode. It's like that. Sometimes symptoms get modified whenever patient takes medicine like sedative. So patient, despite having vertigo, may not have classical symptom of the vertigo. So that also we have to keep in the mind. Now coming to the what are the leading question? What are the symptoms? What are the relevant clinical history we want from in patient with a vertigo? First question is whether what are the symptoms? If it is vertigo, then it is constant or episodic. If it is episodic, then what are the nature of the episodes? What is the duration? What is the frequency of the attack? What are the accompanying symptoms? Whether patient is having any tinnitus, hearing loss, headache, patient is having any neurodeficit. So these are all accompanying symptoms. How did it begin? That is also very important. Whether the onset is sudden or gradual. What are the aggravating, alleviating factor, and what are the triggers? So this is how we take the history of the vertigo patient. Then next important task is separating peripheral from the central vertigo. because central vertigo have prognostic implications. Then treatment of peripheral and central vertigo is different. So this is very important. So now coming to the characteristic peripheral vertigo. Vertigo may be recurrent episodic. It will not last continuously for few months, unlike central vertigo. Usually onset is very sudden. It is most of the time peripheral vertigo is made worse by the head movement. Nystagmus of the peripheral vertigo will be horizontal torsional, and it decreases with visual fixation. Central vertigo, it will be more gradual or subacute in onset. It may be constant. Nystagmus, it will be gaze evoked nystagmus. It can be in all direction, and it is not suppressed by visual fixation. Along with that, patient will have neurodeficit like cerebellar sign, ataxia. Patient will have double vision. Sometimes he will have limb weakness, dysarthria. So these are the points which favor central vertigo. This is how differentiate peripheral from central. Again, onset in peripheral will be acute. In central, it will be subacute to slow. Nystagmus in peripheral vertigo, it will be horizontal, torsional, and it can be suppressed by visual fixation. Suppose we ask patient to fix at the one object, or we remove the and sometimes we have to remove the visual fixation to see the vertigo, to see the nystagmus in peripheral vertigo. In central vertigo, nystagmus is gaze evoked. It is in direction of the gaze, and it is not suppressed. Nausea, vomiting, and otological symptoms are common in peripheral vertigo, while neurological symptoms and instability is more common in central vertigo. As mentioned, peripheral vertigo nystagmus will be fatigable, and it is of short duration, while in central vertigo, it will not fatigue and it will persist. Now coming to the important examination finding, apart from examination, apart from other aspects of examination, these are the points which should be covered in examination of the vertigo patient. We should look for any drop in orthostatic drop in blood pressure. Then cranial nerve examination, especially extraocular movement and lower cranial nerve. Then peripheral sensory examination, cerebellar signs, gait, and hearing. Bedside hearing or in office we can test hearing by finger rub at 70 centimeter, and if you have any doubt or any abnormality, then we can go ahead with detailed testing with Rennie's, Weber's, other or audiometry also. These are the some movements which have some implication in examination in vertigo patient: pursuit, saccades, optoconic nystagmus, and VOR. So pursuit are the smooth voluntary movements of the eyes used to track a target moving at a slow velocity. Suppose I want to see my hand which is moving slowly, so my eyes will move slowly. So this happens because of smooth pursuit movement. And suppose I want to see quickly from one object to other object, I want to shift my gaze quickly, then this is done by saccades. These are the quick corrective movements. In optokinetic nystagmus, it's a combination of fast and slow movements of the eyes. Suppose we are traveling by bus or train, and if we try to see something outside, so our eyes follow the object till it goes out of the sight, and again there is a refixation. So these movements is called optokinetic nystagmus, which can be seen. VOR, vestibulo-ocular reflex, they tend to cause the eye movement in the same velocity but opposite the direction of the head movement. So VOR suppression can be tested bedside using the swivel chair. Fix on the one object like this and move the chair and see the eye movements. See any abnormality in the eye movement, especially the breaking of the eye movements or saccades while doing this movement, then it is abnormal. Now coming to the nystagmus. Nystagmus is direction of the nystagmus is toward the fast phase. So there is a baseline firing of the afferent nerve. Suppose this is the right side and left side of the in the first diagram. It is the right side of the patient and left side of the this is the right sided labyrinth and left sided labyrinth. We are moving the head to the right side, and when we move head to the right side, there is an increase. There is stimulation of the horizontal canal on the right side, so its firing increases, while firing of the left side will decrease. So there is a asymmetry. Right will be more active as compared to left. So right will push eyes to the left side, and there will be corrective saccade to the right side. This is a physiological nystagmus which occurs when the head moves. Suppose in second scenario, suppose left is not working normally, it is suppressed, but right is functioning normally. So at baseline there will be asymmetry. Right firing rate is more as compared to left. So right again it is more active as compared to left. Actually left is hypoactive, but there is asymmetry. So relatively right is more active. So it will push eyes to the left side, and there will be the nystagmus and corrective nystagmus, corrective to the right side. So this will be the spontaneous nystagmus which is seen in the resting eyes. Over the period of time, central compensation happens, and this nystagmus will disappear over the period of time, despite having the hypofunctioning or disturbance of the labyrinth. So it is fatigable basically. In peripheral, again we discuss. Important thing is in nystagmus, peripheral nystagmus we can quantify. Suppose the patient is having nystagmus, it will have one direction. Suppose patient is having right-sided nystagmus and it occurs only on the right-sided gaze, then it's a grade 1 nystagmus. Suppose a patient again fixes on the primary gaze, again still we can see the right-sided nystagmus, then it's a grade 2. And suppose we ask patient to see the left side, again still we are seeing the nystagmus, that is severe, it's a grade 3. So this grading is quantifying the severity of the nystagmus, and with follow-up we can see that is improvement or not. So this is a quantification of the eye movements in terms of grades. Now head thrust test, it is abnormal when the vestibular nerve is involved. So it is very important in vestibular neuritis. We ask patient to fix the eyes in the one at the nose of the examiner, and we suddenly give the 10 to 20 degree jerk to the head. So there will be the but in case everything is normal, there will be no saccades. Eyes will be remain in the target. What happens if there is abnormality? Eyes will tend to move to the direction of the head movement, and there will be the corrective saccades. This can be seen at the head thrust test. If it is present, it is abnormal. Now coming to the common vertigo disorders. Vestibular neuritis, just like a Bell's palsy or facial nerve problem, swelling, it is the similar problem in the 8th nerve is vestibular neuritis. There will be no past history of vertigo. Single episode, prolonged episode. Duration of the episode varies from days to weeks. Patient may have associated nausea imbalance. Examination, there can be a peripheral nystagmus. Head impulse test will be positive, and patient can have imbalance. So treatment will be again the line of the Bell's palsy. If patient presents very early in the course, then steroid may help. They not actually alter the long-term course, but they will reduce the duration of the symptoms. Very acute, maybe 1 or 2 day duration, then we can give antiviral also, but not exactly in all patients. Again, vestibular sedatives and can be used for symptomatic benefit till the patient is symptomatic. Then coming to the BPV, it is benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. It is again very much common. Almost 25% of all patients having a vestibular vertigo, vestibular problem. BPPV is one of the common. Here, duration of the vertigo is small, few seconds to less than minute. Always symptom occur whenever there is a change in position. At rest, patient will not have any symptom. Associated with nausea and actually vomiting sometimes. Meniere disease, there is an increase in the pressure of the endolymphatic sac to increase fluid. So it is triggered by the salty foods. Duration of the Meniere disease vertigo, it is quite long, at least 20 minutes for diagnosis, but it lasts for hours also. During episode, patient can have oral fullness, tinnitus, hearing loss, or nausea. This is important. These points are specific for the Meniere's disease. Will not get this oral fullness or hearing loss during the vertigo in other forms of vertigo. And over the period of time, patient can have actually hearing loss also. So this is how Meniere disease is there. Then vestibular paroxysmia. Again, here the symptoms will be for few seconds. It's just like a hemifacial spasm of 7th nerve or trigeminal neuralgia of 5th nerve. Abnormal stimulation of the 8th nerve, vestibular division of the 8th nerve will cause vestibular paroxysmia. Patient will have transient symptom of abrupt onset, spontaneous, and it can be spontaneous, can be positional also. They last for few seconds. There can be associated tinnitus, hearing loss during that episode, but most of the time symptoms are very transient. Examination wise, will not get anything because symptoms are so transient, difficult to find on examination. Treatment is like same. Here anti-vertigo medicine will not work. It will be symptomatic, but treatment will be like carbamazepine, oxcarbazepine, like we treat Tegretol, like we treat trigeminal neuralgia. Same line of management will be for vestibular paroxysmia. Now coming to the migraine, we'll discuss later on also, but migraine is one of the common time of vertigo. I think in daily practice, BPPV and migraine, I think migraine is more common than BPPV. We call it vestibular migraine. Onset generally associated with migraine triggers. Patient will have vertigo for seconds to days. Patient will have headache, visual auras, photophobia, phonophobia during the month. Here the treatment will be treatment of the migraine because the mechanism is the migraine. So we have to address the mechanism. We can give, of course, medicine for symptomatic benefit, but ultimate treatment will be migraine medicines. Now coming to the BPPV. BPPV, as name indicates, it is benign. It is not serious. It is paroxysmal. Most of the time symptoms are very sudden and very sudden onset and unpredictable onset. And positional, it comes always with the head position. Very rarely it is in resting position, but always symptoms are precipitated by the head position, especially with extreme head movement. And we also call it top shelf vertigo. When patient try to attempt something in extreme neck movement, patient can have first attack of vertigo. Most of the time attacks are of brief duration, few seconds or less than 1 minute. Most of the time, sometimes they can be so severe that every time the attack occurs, there will be vomiting. Most common semicircular canal affected here is posterior semicircular canal. This is how we test if patient having BPPV depending on history, then we have to localize which canal is at fault. Most commonly in 90% of the patient, it is a posterior semicircular canal which is affected, followed by horizontal, and very rarely it is anterior. So this is a Dix-Hallpike test. It's a bedside test for the diagnosis of the canal at fault. Here we are testing for the left-sided posterior semicircular canal. Turn head to the left side and bring patient suddenly to the supine position or head hanging position. Wait for 30 seconds to 1 minute. There will be vertigo if posterior semicircular canal is affected. There can be a upbeating nystagmus. It lasts for 30 seconds. Sometimes there can be vomiting also. So we have to explain patient everything in detail before doing this procedure. And once we diagnose that there is a BPPV and posterior semicircular canal is affected, then it can be treated by repositioning maneuver. BPPV occurs because there is abnormal particles like otoconia, which are actually present in the atrial and saccule, and they somehow degenerate, they form the clump, and they go into the semicircular canal. In canalolithiasis, the particles lie actually in the endolymphatic fluid. In lithiasis, these particles they settle over the cupula of the semicircular canal. So the aim of the treatment will be to reposition them back into the atrial and saccule by doing the repositioning maneuver. So this is the Epley's maneuver, which is for the right posterior semicircular canal in this diagram. First step of the Epley's maneuver will be the Dix-Hallpike maneuver, like turning patient to the right side and bringing in the supine position with head hanging position. Wait for 30 seconds. There will be a vertigo, nystagmus. It will settle over a period of 30 seconds to 1 minute. Head, turn head to the wait for 30 seconds. Then ask patient to turn to the one side. Now the head will be in the eyes will point towards the ground, and then suddenly the patient erect. Ask slowly to the steps of the Epley's maneuver. And ask patient, explain patient and patient they can do this maneuver at home also. There is another maneuver called Simmons maneuver for the again here repositioning the posterior semicircular canal is at fault. Turn head to the right side. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I thought I lost. Okay, just a minute. Here, by using Simmons maneuver, we are repositioning the posterior semicircular canal, which is on the in this patient. Turn head to the left, right side, and put on the left side. Wait for 30 seconds and suddenly 180 degree turn and bring him to the right side. Wait for 30 seconds. Simmons maneuver. Slightly difficult to perform, but this is more effective than Epley. Slight modification, we call it modified Simmons maneuver, where we also make the head low position and of the head. But this can be done by patient supervision. Then this can be done 1, 2, or 3 times in a day, depending on the symptom. Ask patient to remain erect and ask patient to avoid the dependent avoid keeping that ear in the dependent. Suppose patient is having right side at fault. Ask patient to keep on the left side. Patient will have this is here one side we have vertigo, and again accordingly once we diagnose treatment will be different manner. not going to detect. Now, coming to the imaging, to advise imaging in patients with vertigo. Not all patients with vertigo need imaging because vertigo is a clinical diagnosis, but some patients having focal progressive symptoms, elderly with new onset vertigo, progressive hearing loss. These are the patients with imaging. Now, CT or MRI, MRI is better because in central pathology of vertigo, we are expecting something in the posterior fossa. It's not all imaging because the MRI is better than CT scan. These are the common lesions in central type of vertigo like cerebral infarct, then multiple sclerosis patient, other degenerative disorders, neurodegenerative disorder. Epilepsy, the vertigo is one of the differential diagnosis, but very, very rare. Now, other vertiginous migraine. This is again very common and very under-recognized problem. Patient generally is a migrainer. We have past history of migraine. Generally a migraine equivalent. There will be no hearing. Migraine vertigo. During attack, we can have both type of nystagmus of characteristic of peripheral vertigo. Here, important is will be migraine treatment. We can use symptomatic management of the vertigo like dimenhydrinate, but long-term events such as that migraine prophylaxis. Now coming to the bilateral vestibulopathy, here I'm just mentioning it. Actually, there is no true vertigo, but this is one of the common problems, especially elderly. They come with unsteadiness of gait. There will be movement with blurring, oscillopsia. Their general symptoms are made worse by the postural imbalance, instability, darkness, uneven ground, getting warm. On examination, they can be bilateral suppressed VOR, but here the treatment will be the gait training rather than giving the vestibular sedative. Now coming to the medical treatment of this vertigo. Normally in acute vertigo, we should avoid long-term treatment with recovery from the vertigo. Dimenhydrinate, domperidone, fluclorazine, scopolamine, cinnarizine. These are commonly used. Then commonly other medicine is a beta-histine. It will be a H1 or agonist and S3 antagonist. It also improves nausea, vomiting, vertigo. Now coming to the side effect profile, this is very important because most of the medicines used in vertigo, they have intrapenetrable feature of the side effects. They are not a long-term good medicine. So if you see they can be used briefly. Normally, we give 3 to 5 days of the vestibular suppression, and we can continue with the beta-histine. In Meniere's disease, we can again use normally 16 milligram 3 times optimum. Thank you for your attention. In case you have any questions,
is Dr. Sirvi here?
Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Is Dr. Sirvi here? If there are any questions, please, Dr. Sirvi. If there are any questions, please go ahead.
How long to continue with beta-histine, doctor?
It depends on the vertigo. Like in vestibular neuritis, the attack will last for few days to few weeks. So maybe after 2 weeks or so, we try to reduce the dose if patient feels better, because duration of vestibular neuritis vary from patient to patient. Then in Meniere's disease, patient may need beta-histine for months till the attack is there, or till you give the corrective in BPPV, actually there is no role of beta-histine. Actual treatment of BPPV will be the repositioning management. But during the attacks, patient may feel dizzy, and there is no harm in giving beta-histine for 2 weeks or so. 3 times to reduce the dose. Out of all the medical request medicine, because they don't have extra parameters features as a side effect. So it's generally paroxysm, there is no role of pitastine. Migraine also there is no role of pitastine. Depending on the symptoms, maybe sufficient.
Thank you.
Is Dr. Saab, is physiotherapy any good for any patients of BPPV?
Yeah. And BPPV first we do repositioning maneuver, but despite that, sometimes there may be lingering symptoms in between the attacks because it is a recurrent vertigo. In this patient, we advise rehabilitation exercises where which are widely available, so it will help. It's helping the increase in the compensatory mechanism so that despite vertigo, patient will not recover.
Is there any other questions? Dr. Are there any questions? Is Dr. Khemsara there?
अरे राजू, इससे मेरा कैमरा खोलना नहीं है, तो इनका लेक्चर है इसको
Dr. Devda, is there any question for you?
You already asked the question.
Yes. So for migrainous vertigo, all the medicines which are used for prevention of migraine,
Yes, sir.
they are the ones that are being used for vertigo also?
Sir, if it is vertiginous migraine, we can give medicines for short duration like dimenhydrinate or for 3 to 4 days or till the attack is there. But to prevent the attack, again, we have to address the mechanism of the vertigo. The mechanism is migraine pathology. So we have to give the amitriptyline, these beta blockers, valproate. So same medicine for the vertigo, migraine will work in a vertiginous migraine.
Any other question in the chat box?
No, I can't see any question.
Okay. So thank you very much, sir. You have made it absolutely clear. It was a very elaborate discussion and very nice pictures. And all the major concepts have been taken care of so nicely. Thank you, Vishal. You have been always so good to us. Last year also you did a wonderful job. And so also this year. Thank you very much for sparing time with us.
Thank you once again, sir. Thank you for inviting me and giving this opportunity to interact with you, sir. Thank you, sir.